personal development and spirituality has been a really big piece of my journey. And so I think as an entrepreneur, your personal development really directly affects your business.
Mm-hmm.
So the deeper that you can know yourself and know what you bring to the table and have, figure out what your gifts are that you bring to the world is how you can actually like create more clarity with your personal brand.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. Before we get started, if you could hit that little like and subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching, it helps a ton with the algorithm. It helps with searchability, and then you won't miss an episode anytime we drop one. I'm not going to go through all of the sponsors or affiliates for this week's episode. If you want to check them out, you can look in the show notes below. I will link a couple of cool companies and programs that I endorse and I think that are great and I've tried myself. And I think that's all. We just got done with our cups of coffee for my last episode, so I'm all caught up at this exact moment. If you do want to support the podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandice.com and you can either click the link that says Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. It all goes back into the show. So thank you for your support for anyone that has been doing that. And I think that's it. So let's hop into this episode. We have Nick Onken on the podcast. Nick is a very celebrated international photographer. He has shot the likes of Justin Bieber, Tom Hanks, Jessica Alba. He's worked with companies like Nike, Coca-Cola, Adidas, Cosmopolitan. He also hosts the podcast Onken Radio, and he is working on an incredible masterclass, which we will get into. So please help me welcome the very creative and very talented Nick Onken. Nick, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I'm really excited to have you on. The more I dug into you and your story and your content, I realized how many like little degrees of separation that we are. So I'm friends with Jim Quick. I heard you talking about Emily. She actually just left here a couple days ago, and I was just really excited to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Emily Fletcher?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I've known her for ages.
Yeah, she's incredible. She was here for 2 days. I can't wait. This will be coming out right after her episode. So,
Okay.
yeah, she's just amazing. I've been doing her Ziva practice, and then we got into some really cool stuff, but she's like a new friend.
Amazing. Yeah, I've known her for years, actually. She's been my meditation teacher for years.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into that with you as well. But first, I guess we have to start with your incredible backdrop. I was perusing all of your hats. Your hats are amazing. So I just wanted to say, like, they are so unique and so beautiful. And I love that that's a creative outlet for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun little side project.
Yeah, so I guess let's jump into creativity. I was watching your Jim Quick interview, and in part of it, he was saying that he believes that the future belongs to the creatives, especially because of where we're going with AI. And that stuff has only gotten crazier since that interview has come out. Do you believe that everyone has the ability to tap into creativity, or are some people born with this je ne sais quoi, and some people are just more analytical and don't have that capability?
Yeah, I would say everybody is a creative. Not everybody's an artist per se. However, I think we're all born with an innate desire to create, and sometimes people's creations could be their business. It could be spreadsheets. Like, I think creating is whatever you're creating from nothing to something, and it gives you joy and it puts you into a flow state, because creativity it's a state of mind, really. Creating your life is a state of mind. I just did a video as like, what's the one biggest mindset shift that has revolutionized my life? And it's the mindset of creativity, because if we live in a space of creativity where creativity is problem solving, creativity is innovation, creativity is choosing what you want your life to be, taking responsibility for your life, like 100% responsibility for everything that you create in your life, whether it's good results or bad results, you still created it. So I think creativity it's a mindset really over anything. Art is a whole nother idea, right? Like, and I think there's a lot of artists out there that just haven't even like given themselves the time to develop that art. And so sometimes you don't even know, a lot of times people will say like, oh, I'm not an artist, but like, have you really given yourself the time to develop that art? If that's really, I think if you've given a lot of time to it and then you're just not good, maybe that's not your outlet. However, if you enjoy it and it brings you joy, it doesn't have to. I think it's really about finding what brings you joy, and a lot of those things are like, what did you use to create as a kid? For me, I used drawing and painting as a kid, and I enjoyed it. But it's like, and also how much did your parents allow you to? And there's all these different things that I think make that idea.
How
They make.
so how do you start to so I think it's beautiful to go back to your earlier childhood memories and try to find what sparked joy and what was your creative expression like before we kind of calloused up or the world told us that art is a dead end. Because I think that's a common narrative we hear a lot is that art's not going to make you money, or there's that starving artist mentality, or that they're just kind of wandering people and it's not disciplined. And the more that I've been reading on it, so it's funny because a lot of books that you've mentioned, I've had one of my friends throw my way, and I'm like, I'm not an artist. I don't need these books. So as I was watching your content, I just felt like it was another sign for me to read those books. So I quickly did the Blinks earlier today of them. I don't know if you know what the Blinks app is, but
Oh,
do you
is
use
it
it?
like is it? I think I've seen it. Is it just a quick synopsis of a book?
Yeah, it's incredible, and their library is massive. So I have the books,
Oh,
I
wow.
will read them, but I did the Blinks, and one common thread throughout, one of them was the War of Art, the other one was The Artist's Way, and then, one of them was like a Stoic, The Art of Living, and a common thread throughout all of them was actually discipline, and like you mentioned, extreme accountability and taking ownership of, you are creating your reality. And then without those things, that's kind of what some people were calling either a resistance or like almost like hindrances that you put in your own way without knowing, because you want to avoid failure. So you want to avoid the thing that everyone told you is going to inevitably happen if you take the creative pathway. So I guess first, did you have those narratives growing up? Like, did you have a supportive system that encouraged that creative outlet, or did you have a lot of undoing there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I did have a creative outlet. My parents were always very encouraging me to play and to create and to draw and do whatever I really wanted. And that was such a blessing. I also grew up in a very conservative Christian upbringing, which is also repressive in and of itself. And it's funny because I've been doing a lot of like I'm building out. I help people with their personal brands, and I'm building out a course called Identity Alchemy. And this is kind of one of the biggest things that just came up is like, for me, I was making art as a kid because I was repressed in different ways. And art was my own way of liberating myself. And then that grew into down the road, helping other people, doing photography and helping other people see themselves through what I'm creating in a different medium. But yeah, like it was this, I I was blessed to be able to have parents who very much encouraged me to practice art, to play around with it, to do whatever I wanted. And it was just funny how this like it all kind of just transpired into this other outlet that I didn't even know was happening. It was just like subconsciously happening as I was creating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would assume that that's almost like a living, breathing thing that needs to be checked back in on, and it's evolving maybe in ways on its own. I find like when I start to create something, whether it's a business or I'm trying to define like what is the podcast, what is the audience, what is the brand behind that, like who am I trying to reach, what's the personality of the show, it starts to kind of tell you on its own. You can try to control it as much as you want, and then I feel like in the beginning, the more control that I was trying to exercise over, I don't know, over all aspects of it, really, the worse it was doing. And then when I kind of just let it be and kind of surrendered to to conversation, to guess, approach things with more curiosity, the better it did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're coming at it with that mindset of curiosity and exploration without any attachment to what the results, you start to explore things and you like try one thing and you're like, oh, that didn't work. And then you try this thing and I was like, oh, I like that. I'm gonna do that again. And then like you start to like that's how you develop a style, I believe, and you go into a space of like creating a career in art. It's all about having a specific style that people come to you for. And the only way to develop that is to like lead with curiosity and explore different spaces and see what you keep coming back to and you keep gravitating towards, and you kind of build that into like your aesthetic or ethos or whatever that looks like. It's your brand essentially. When it comes down to it, it's the brand of your perspective on the world, because that's what art is, right? I don't know if have you read Rick Rubin's new book?
Mm-mm.
It's a creative Bible. It's like
Okay.
it is my favorite book on creativity. Do you know who Rick Rubin is?
The name sounds super familiar.
He's a legendary producer. So he's produced every major hit album from across every genre, from Adele to Jay-Z to like Metallica, and he like artists come to him when they're stuck and they
Mm.
can't, that like maybe it's like a second album that they like signed a contract for, and they're like they just can't find the album, right? And he has all these just very like zen practices, some his whatever his way of being is, that helps these artists get what they need to get out. He's such a brilliant, he's a genius in that space. And so just in that respect, like there's so much wisdom in that book on creativity and how to activate it and how to let it flow and how to let it, you know, guide, create the guide rails for your own creative flow and your own creative output.
What's your approach when you get stuck?
Um, it depends. I mean, like, I think getting into a space of art and art for commerce is a whole nother area of differentiation. And for me, I've always I've done stuff more for the commerce, which is a lot of the photography stuff. My background's doing like a lot of commercial brands like Nike and Reebok. And, a lot of those brands are less creative, but they're a lot of money. And that money allows me to go and create the stuff that I want to create. So when I'm creating the stuff that I want to create and I get stuck, sometimes it's like about trying a new medium and trying a different creative outlet. I mean, that's how I started making hats because I was just like, oh, I just want to try something new, and play around. And I think building a career as an artist, it's like better to focus in one thing first and become known for that, and then start playing around with different mediums. I was playing around with like hand drawn type, and I was a graphic designer for 5 years before I was a photographer. So now all that stuff's coming into play with everything that I'm doing. So I tend to bounce across different mediums. When I feel stuck with one, I'll work on another one, and then I'll work on another one over here.
So
So yeah.
when you're developing like brand identities for people, or identity alchemy, do you have like a practice of nuance that you encourage them to do? Because that was in one of the books too, is the importance of nuance, whether that's taste, like even just tasting something new or taking a different route home. Like we end up in these patterns and these habits, kind of not even aware of a lot of them. We just kind of daydream throughout a lot of our routine in our life, and then little things like taking a different route home can get you off of that habit or that pattern, and like start bringing new awareness into your brain.
Yeah, pattern interrupts are definitely a huge piece. And I think there's different ways when I'm working with people. So if I'm doing a photo shoot with somebody for their personal brand, a big pattern interrupt is getting them moving and getting them dancing and getting them out of their comfort zone. But like also it's an element of distraction, right? Like if I get somebody dancing or moving, they get out of their head and they're just like, oh, and then they loosen up. It breaks their pattern of like stiffening up. And sometimes I'll over direct them. It depends on who it is. Everybody's different, right? Like some people are like so comfortable in front of the camera. A lot of it's more about collaboration, whereas some people are like never been in front of a camera before, and I'll give them like so much direction they're almost confused in a certain sense. But like that's actually it allows me to capture and bring out their essence when they're not as in their head. So I would say for that, that's a big piece of pattern interrupt. And like identity alchemy is now, I'm building out this process. I'm building out this course I'm deep in this launch right now, which is really funny. And it's like, talk about feeling stuck and being in my own dojo, is like doing marketing stuff and sales stuff is like so not in my zone of genius. But like I was just talking about this today. I was like, I keep picking up my phone and scrolling because I'm just like avoiding doing all these things. I'm like, and like I'm like taking all this stuff in and analyzing it and utilizing it to put into the course as well, because there's a whole element like personal development and spirituality has been a really big piece of my journey. And so I think as an entrepreneur, your personal development really directly affects your business.
Hmm.
So the deeper that you can know yourself and know what you bring to the table and have, figure out what your gifts are that you bring to the world, is how you can actually like create more clarity with your personal brand and then tell that story visually as well, and visual assets and things like that. So, there's so many different aspects to this journey.
So, coming from a conservative Christian background and now being in more of like the spiritual realm or category, what has that transition been like for you, and what modalities have you used to unpack that quintessential who am I before you start creating a brand around it, and then undoing maybe certain default settings that you don't know if you want to keep or toss or evolve?
Yeah, funny you asked that, because this is also, yeah, it's like the identity alchemy really is the process of personal development and self mastery, and it came from exactly what you're talking about, is coming from this conservative Christian background, and really it took me 7 years to let go of the fear of going to hell.
Mm,
Deconstructing that, and like listening and understanding new philosophies, and talking, having different conversations with people, and kind of, after 7 years of letting that aspect go, it was another like 7 years of kind of, oh, what am I kind of taking in? Who do I want to be, or what do I want to believe in this world? And there was a big, that 7 year portion was also this piece of like, oh, I kind of believe this. I kind of, it was like, it was really reconstructing a whole new identity. So that's kind of what the process is too. It's deconstruct, curate, become. And this is like a process that you can use for anything in your life, really, as well as a personal brand. But it took me, I was like deconstructing my faith, deconstructing my belief in Christianity, and asking myself questions of like, wait, is this really what I was? This was just like what I was cultured to believe. Like, this was my adopted identity that my parents told me that I needed to be or to believe. And but I was like, deep down inside, I never really believed in that specific like dogmatic piece of the religion, right?
mhm.
And so deconstructing that, and then deconstructing like, what is my gift to the world? What do I love to do? Who do I want to be in this world? And then curating and architecting, like, what does this new me or this new identity look like? And it's really is like, I'm still a very spiritual person, and I believe there's a lot of similarities. I just, I think but that's taken me years to kind of get to that space, and reading different books, and kind of, adopting this belief and that belief, and kind of putting it all together. And then really now the becoming piece of it, the expression piece of it is, who do I get to be? How do I step into this? How do I embody this? And so that's like a bigger version of the process. And then like little versions of this are happening now. Like even this year, I've just been going through this whole identity alchemy process of deeper masculinity and presence. And I just got LASIK surgery like a month ago, which is wild, because like I've worn glasses since I was 6 months old.
Wow.
And yeah, and I'm 44 now. And
Do
so
you feel like a piece of you is missing?
I do. And I have like these nervous tics where I keep like going up to grab my glasses. And I'm like, oh, wait, but I can see like crystal clear now. And it's amazing. And with that also has come my girlfriend and I, we did this like ceremony around the surgery, and like, who am I stepping into as the next version of myself? Like, who am I becoming? And it's like presence and deeper masculinity, and more, yeah, just a different type of man.
So
So it's
how
been, yeah.
how
Go ahead.
has your idea of masculinity changed? And I guess what was the big contrast between before and after?
It's funny because if you look at my Instagram, you can definitely see it, because I was wearing hats and glasses, and like it's kind of like more this like, hey, animated character, which I still, there's pieces of me within that, but now without the glasses, I can be a lot more. I'm a lot more open, a lot more vulnerable, a lot more. Even if I take off the hat, it's like, oh, I look totally different. And I think this is yeah, it's like part of the identity alchemy piece of it. But like, yeah, being able to be more present and more dropped in and more powerful, I think that's a big piece of it. And
Mhm.
especially being in this relationship, it's teaching me a lot of masculine feminine dynamics, of even diving into like sacred sexuality and things like that. That's also a new space for me because I grew up in a space of no sex before marriage driven down my throat for however many years. And
Right, so the
now it's
concept that sex could be sacred is very nuanced for a lot of people. You're like, "Wait, I thought that was sinful. Only within a very specific tight parameter can it exist." So the idea that you're allowed to play with it and it can be this very powerful connection and even spiritual experience, a lot of people are like, "Well, that sounds a little witchy. I'm not sure about that."
yeah, and I've been really diving into. There's these two teachers, John Wineland and Justin Patrick Pierce, who I just hired as a coach around all of this stuff. And it's so much about masculine, feminine energetics to deepen your relationship in a polarity sense of like a deeper polarity. And this is all like very new in the space
Mhm,
because there's not a lot of. I mean, there's not been a lot of women that that I've dated who have been interested in this type of thing until now. And
mhm.
so it's a whole different ball game, and that's a whole nother piece of self mastery on my that I want to learn how to like deepen and to be more fully expressed in that area. And I've had to shed a lot of my old Christian identity of like shedding those old belief systems that like sex isn't okay, sex is bad, sex is wrong, and to now where it's like, oh, it's completely spiritual and magical, and you can access different, you know, spaces of consciousness through it.
Which they have verified that, like, there are altered states of consciousness, whether you're meditating and you're in, like, this theta or alpha, or with some people, like, a very deep delta, but they're not actually asleep. The same can happen with sex. So it is really interesting. You do see these pioneers out there. Emily's actually one of them that's kind of getting into pleasure prayer. So that's actually why she was out here, is we did like a not really a one-on-one because my husband also participated, but she kind of taught us her protocol around pleasure prayer and using your
Mm.
pleasure as a means for manifestation, which is just crazy and very bold because a lot of people are, you know what I mean, gonna have their judgments around it. But you have the ability to reframe what you want sexuality to mean to you, or masculinity to mean to you, or what kind of polarity you want within your relationship. So I think it's amazing that you're very consciously going into those things, because so many people, it's just default. This is the way that we're supposed to interact. This is the rules of our relationship, without even investigating, do I want these to be the rules of my relationship? Is this the dynamic that I want with my partner? So when with your girlfriend now, how have you gotten to a space where you're comfortable bringing these topics up to her about sacred sexuality or polarity play or anything like that?
Honestly, she's one who's like she's been studying this stuff for like 7 years, and she teaches like quantum manifestation and healing and all of that stuff. So you know, she's been in this work for a long time. So in a sense, I feel like I'm just catching up.
Mm.
Which is great. You know, this is like I feel it's also like I've looked into this stuff before, but I never really had anybody that was wanting to practice, and now I do. So that's a beautiful thing. And so yeah, it's been a deep initiation as well, and you know, discovering my own, you know, feelings and ceilings and pushing through those ceilings. I was like, I feel like I was talking to my friend. I was like, I feel like, actually, no, I was talking to her and I was like, I'm in this dojo of everything right now. It's like, I'm pushing my edges across across like launching this course, across this relationship, across like, you know, moving to Austin, you know, picking up and moving and like so many things. And it's so much growth, but I feel like I'm just like, which is it's great. I mean, I'm all about self mastery and growth, and otherwise, like life would be so boring if you're just doing the same thing every day and not growing, not learning.
Yeah, if you're not growing, you're rotting.
Totally, absolutely.
How do you get comfortable with the edges? So for me, I I always consider myself a very risk averse person, and I started taking like these little, have you heard of the I am driven test, or like your Colby score or any of those kinds of tools.
I've heard of the Colby. I haven't heard of the I Am Driven one
Okay,
before.
so the I am driven one, it's basically to assess it'll give you the 95% of the population. It's like this little gray circle and then where you fall in relationship to the populace. So are you within that gray circle? Are you an outlier in one or many or all areas? And it I believe is kind of an assessment of if you have ADD or ADHD. And there's a link between that and high functioning creatives and just like very successful entrepreneurs. Like they were saying something like a very high percentage of high performers will actually be in like this red outward bubble. So I took all these tests because of this person that I met and he wanted me to do them before a phone call and I was like, I'm probably going to be I don't have ADD. I don't have any of these things. Well, according to my Colby score and the I am driven, I'm supposed to be this crazy risk taker and I look at previous careers and I was like, okay, well maybe this could have been defined as risky behavior. I just wasn't identifying it as it. And then I realized where I have so much fear almost subconsciously around taking risks, especially around business that's not even mine. It's like scarcity mindset maybe given to me by a parent that was too scared to take risks themselves. So I've had to reestablish what I want around risk taking and being bold and being creative and say, like, no, I can be this person that can be comfortable on the edges and take risks. I just have to unpack a lot of my previous programming. So, what was your route to being able to develop these courses and start new businesses and be a very successful photographer and creative?
Yeah, I think part of it was also that like thinking that like always I feel like there's more. You know, it was like when I was younger, it was like I was in this religion. I was always like, "Oh, there feels like something more, and that was like that this curiosity of the world. And then I started traveling, and traveling started opening my eyes to what was out there. And then I read Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week a long, long time, when I was like 21 or whatever, and that was so much of a eye opening piece of like, oh, I can design my life the way that I want to. And so I've always had that philosophy. And so I think there's just always been like part of that creative mindset for me was just like taking risks and not like one of my first when I got into photography, I convinced a nonprofit design client of mine to split the expenses on a trip to Africa to build them a photo library. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, oh, I could do this. And I just like figured it out as I went. And that's probably also, it's like the creative problem solving on the fly, right? Like you're always going to figure it out. Right. And then I also think there's like a belief in like the universe or whatever that like everything, like obviously like our thoughts create our reality. Right. So if we
Mhm.
believe that everything's going to work is working out for us, there is that element. You're also shifting and shaping your reality with that belief system as well, which is also that creative mindset. So you're creating your reality through your thoughts and through your emotions. I don't know if have you looked into Joe Dispenza much?
Yeah, I am actually like rereading a bunch of his stuff right now. His work is fascinating, and a lot of the examples he gives are going to sound sci fi, but they are 100% real, based off of actual studies or even like personal anecdotal evidence. Is just mind blowing on how much you can shift in just like eliminating negative self talk and how we're making ourselves sick. And yeah, I highly recommend all of his books to everybody.
Yeah, Becoming Supernatural changed my life. I was that book was so fascinating to me because it brought the science behind all the woo woo stuff that you've heard about, this new
Mhm.
agey stuff, this woo woo stuff. But like his work just really helped me kind of understand that from a scientific perspective and to see what they're doing now. Like it is insane. I've talked to people who have been to his workshops, and they're like, people are getting up out of wheelchairs and healing cancer and just through meditation. And he also talks about like when your thoughts and intentions match your elevated emotions, it's when you start creating and manifesting. I'm
Mhm.
sure Emily talked a lot about this as well. And
Exactly. Yeah,
um,
she was using him as an example and I guess she's done some of his seminars and she was like, "Well, he's doing something very similar to what she's doing, but she's just bringing pleasure into it." So it's like if you could do one without the other, why or if you could do one and have it be more pleasurable, why not? And in her theory, that pleasure is this very heightened state. Like it is one of the most heightened states, so it's just a massive magnifier for manifestation.
yeah, exactly. Sex magic its pleasure is like a high frequency. So if you're like creating from that space, and creating from that emotion, then you are creating your reality from that space. And so going back to what we were talking about, creation is also in the thought space and the emotion space. And so I think creating thoughts that are positive, that you're going to be okay, that like everything's like working out for you. These things also help, I don't say mitigate risk, but they shape shift you from taking those risks, or having it be such a risk, I should say.
So what was your biggest change after reading his work? Like were you going through like any health issues, or was it more like mindset based?
For me, it was mindset. I was going through a really big dark night of the soul. I'd come out of a breakup, and I was like trying to figure out my business stuff, and I was just dark. I just like I'd never been in a dark night of the soul. Well, I was in one probably like 10 years ago ish, yeah. And then like this was another. Like I was in another one. This was like a lot deeper, because I was just like, what is the point of anything? This is all made up. Like I was just in this really dark space. I did some psychedelics, and I did Bufo, which was like I don't know if you're familiar.
I know, yeah, I haven't done it, but you can tell the listeners.
Yeah, Bufo is from a toad. It's like it blasts you off into like everything. And I was like, I did that for the first time, and I was like, wow, if this is out there, then. And I came back, and I was like, what are we doing here? If that exists, what are we doing here? And it created a little bit of a, because I was already in a dark night of the soul. It kind of created this space, like a deeper dark night. And then I discovered breathwork, and breathwork was a huge piece of what like brought me back to, like, I don't know, normality or whatever you want to call it. And I was accessing similar states on the breath work as I was in the DMT experience. So I was doing that for a while, and then I was on this road trip. I went on this road trip from Napa to Seattle, where my family lived, and I got becoming supernatural was just an audible suggestion, and I was like, I want to become supernatural. So I bought it and I listened to it. And I was like, whoa! I like flew through the whole book, blew my mind. And I think for me, it was just like, it created so much understanding around like energy and emotions, and it brought it all together for me in a new way, to where I was like, oh, I understand like how to utilize the metaphysical to the physical, and how that kind of works now. So it just gave me a whole new perspective on life and thought creation, and what life, or just like creation in this hologram.
Yeah, highly recommend to everyone. I've been going back and forth with this thyroid issue, which is what got me to start revisiting his books again, because I'm like, well, something's happening, and I know that I've done it before. Like I've gotten into remission before. Like I know I can do it again. And I've finished Becoming Supernatural. I'm almost done rereading You Are the Placebo, and I'm back to like my baseline levels. So like knock on wood, it sticks there. But like personal anecdotal level, like I've done serious thyroid remission from reading his books and doing his meditations, and just like doing a mind detox, like going in and auditing your mind and your thoughts, and seeing how much of that is just automatically negative and how much of it is positive. And you are like your
Yeah.
worst critic to yourself all day. Like at least I am. I'm my worst critic all day to myself.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you have thyroid cancer?
No, not cancer. So I have Graves' disease, which is hyperactive thyroid autoimmune disorder.
Mm,
Basically, it's just like running rampant. And then I had my second baby, and it actually flipped and went into Hashimoto's. So basically, crazy underactive. And then I ended up getting really depressed because of it, because your thyroid just controls so much of your body and your thoughts. And almost, I dare say, personality. Like if it's really off, you become a different person, and it's like the most frustrating out of body experience, because deep inside, like you're like, I know I'm not these things, and like this isn't how I show up to this, or this isn't how I react, but I'm still doing it. Yeah, it's a really trippy for someone who hasn't experienced it. So I was determined to try to figure it out, because there's no cure to any of it, and the medication works or it doesn't work. And it's like you
yeah.
have the power within you to heal a lot of things that people act like you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my girlfriend had thyroid cancer, and basically like she had to take it out, but like was healed herself through all these modalities as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like she wasn't going to get well, and then she met with this doctor, or like a, I don't know, like a naturopathic doctor kind of, and started doing all these different meditations and different holistic practices, and basically healed herself.
What's really interesting with that too is if you do take the thyroid out, they've done some studies where they reinvestigate the area and they realize that up to 30% of the thyroid tissue can actually still be in your body. So it'll attach to different parts of like that area. So even though
Mm,
the thyroid's not there, if you are doing these meditations and you're focusing on hormone production, that you can actually create it still naturally within your body because like there are still remnants there, even though they thought they took the whole thing out, which is really cool.
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's also, yeah, it goes into like thought patterns and traumas and things like that as well.
Yeah, highly, highly recommend. And the breathwork piece is really interesting because I feel like a lot of us have adopted meditation. So a lot of people kind of understand all of the benefits, whether it's for mental clarity, performance, general well being. And now breathwork, I feel like, is the next thing that's starting to get that adoption. What is the breathwork that you choose to do? Like, what's your favorite breathwork protocol?
I mean, the one that I do most is like a Wim Hof style. Do you know what, you know Wim Hof? I'm
Yeah,
assuming
yeah,
you're.
yeah. We have a Morosco forge outside, so my husband does it right before, and then while he gets in the ice bath, and I just watch and chuckle while he does it because I love watching it. It's so funny.
Yeah, I created it when I was going through the dark night of the soul. Somebody had I've done it before, his breath work, but I was at this event, and this guy was like, "Oh, I study under Wim Hof. If you guys, I can lead a breathwork session." And he did it, and we did it laying down with the lights down and music going, and like eye mask, and it was completely shifted the whole experience. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I gotta like start doing this. So that's kind of what I started doing it every day, doing this like 6 rounds of it. And then I eventually created my own like track, like guiding track, so that it could be more meditative, like with my voice, over the timestamps of each round and everything. And that's really like the thing. I do that one the most.
Mhm,
I've done other modalities, like I've done holotropic breath work, and then I'll do other more calming, different types of like breath to calm the nervous system, things like that.
mhm.
But if I'm doing breath work, it's typically the Wim Hof style.
There's this app you should check out. I'm not sure if you've tried using it or not. It's called Othership, and it's amazing. So they incorporate a lot of movement and music into it, and he has like a couple studios throughout the country. And I think he's trying to open up one in New York if it hasn't opened up yet. But it's this very full body experience, which I like. And they have cool couples ones, or if you can't sleep, they have those. They have manifestation ones. So they have really cool categories for you to like focus your breath work on. The holotropic one is trippy because you can have like psychedelic like experiences if you do it for long enough. I have not gotten there yet, but we did it at like this live summit kind of a thing, and everyone else is just like freaking out and having this wild ride, and I'm like, why is this not working for me? So I haven't gotten there yet, but I've seen it happen, which is really cool.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I haven't had fully psychedelic experiences. I was in Tulum. We did a breathwork session. I had a little bit of psychedelic experience towards the at the end. It wasn't a holotropic. It was like very intense, like breathing for like 30 minutes or something like that straight. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I laid down, I was like, I saw like the energy moving. It was like a psychedelic. I saw like colors and psychedelic movement in my field, which was cool.
Did you get the lobster hands?
I have not on this one, but I have definitely gotten lobster hands many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, I was doing it next to my husband, and while it wasn't it was definitely user error because I was probably one of the very few people that wasn't either, like, clenched up or having, like, some kind of a trip. I looked over at him, and he's just like a little T-Rex with his lobster hands. I'm like, "Well, I know it's working because he's not full of shit, so if it's working for him, I know this thing is real. It's just has to do with me and my lack of ability to surrender into into the experience." So, something to be worked on for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I noticed too, sometimes it's like how deep the breaths are going. If you're
Mm.
like breathing like like really deep, I'll feel the oxygen going through, and I'll get the T-Rex hands a lot more than if I'm not breathing as deep.
That's it. Yeah, I'll try that and take note of that. And then I saw, speaking of breath work, it was do you know what's his name? Max Lu I don't know,
Max
he's
Lugabeer.
yes,
Yeah.
he was tweeting today. So they did a study, it's a relatively new one, and for people that were practicing breath work, which was like it was really simple. It wasn't anything crazy like holotropic where there's like a strict protocol. It was simple, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out for 2 weeks. They saw a decline in proteins associated with Alzheimer's, which is incredible.
Wow. That's
Right.
crazy.
So, like, if you're not looking to do any of this trippy hippie stuff, even for that, for longevity, it's good for that. So definitely check out some breathing exercises, people.
Yeah, I'm definitely down in like all of this stuff. It's the most deep activated, like the more you can get into your body and the more you can activate and ground. It just activates different things within your cells and within your mental state and all of that stuff.
So, Dark Night of the Soul, is that a retreat, or is that like, what can you elaborate on that? I know there's like a
It was like a
movie,
year.
right? Like Aubrey has a movie, isn't it called that or
That's different.
okay.
So that's a darkness retreat.
Okay.
Dark Night of the Soul. It was like a year long retreat for me in my own space. So I didn't even know what the Dark Night of the Soul was, and I had gone through this breakup, and I was just like, I was reading all these books. I was like, but I just was like so had no motivation for anything. I didn't want to do anything. I was just like, what's the point of any of this? It was just this space that I was in, this time frame that I was in. And I was just like, how do I get out of this? It was like, I just want to feel good again. But I wasn't. I just felt dark. I was like, and then when I found this, then I did the DMT, and then I discovered the breath work, and then I was looking up, I started researching holotropic breathwork, and I came across Stanislav Grof, who's the founder of it. And then I found this group on Facebook, and then I saw that one of my friends was in this group. And so I messaged him and I was like, hey, so like, tell me about breathwork, tell me about this stuff. He's like, yeah, I went through a dark night of the soul. And I was like, it really helped me. And I was like, what is a dark night of the soul? And he was like, it's just this space where you go through, where you're just kind of it's like a low in your life where you just can't see the point of anything. It's like, you're not depressed. You don't want to, you're not suicidal, but you just like are in a really, really dark, unmotivated space. And so I Googled it, and I was like, I saw this test. I took this test on some website, and I was like, yeah, that's me. I was like, I feel like I don't want to do anything. I don't want to like, I barely even want to get out of bed and like all these different things. And I was like, that's not like me. Like, I've never been like this before. And so it's actually a thing. The dark night of the soul is a thing. It's like a thing that you go through where, it's like a rock bottom type of space where you just don't want to do anything. And you don't feel like you want to get out of bed, and you can't see the point of life. For me, it was I couldn't see the point of life, and of like what are we doing here? This is all just fabricated. This is all just made up. Like, we're literally just here existing as humans on this planet. What's the point? That's like kind of like the space that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it was like it was I needed to go through that, to come out on the other side. And that's like a big space of discovering the spiritual world, the spirituality piece of it, discovering the breath work, discovering all these different modalities that have deep, like, created more depth in my own life, more depth, more expression. And, I've come to a whole new space of like, yeah, like I want to live this life fully expressed. I want to live this life to the best that it can possibly be,
Mm-hmm.
and be in that. So that is different than a darkness retreat, which is a new thing now. I think Aubrey started it, and like Aubrey started kind of like the trend of it. But like, there's different darkness retreats. I know Emily just did it
Mm-hmm.
as well, and my friend Blue did it, and a few other people like Aaron Rodgers did it. And it's like you go into complete darkness for like, I think it's like 3 to 5 days. You could be even up to 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And you literally are just like completely deprived of anything visual, obviously. And so it pushes you into, it's like another kind of almost medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of doing plant medicine, or it's like it'll push things up to the surface for you to like learn and to grow from. And I've never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll do it.
Do you have any interest?
I've thought about it.
Yeah.
I could probably do like a 3-day. I don't know if I could do 10. A friend of mine, the guys that led the breathwork down in Tulum a few weeks ago, he did like a 10-day darkness retreat, and I was like, bro, that's intense.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Maybe,
maybe.
yeah, not for me. I don't think that's my jam. I was telling Emily that because she was fresh out of it when she got here. I think she said she was out for like a day or two. So like the first thing she did was
God.
come out here and practice like pleasure prayer and podcast. So like you're really just jumping right back into the real world after that. She was, I think, still kind of processing her experience, which I bet like that's brave and bold. And I was telling her, I was like, I don't know if that's going to be my modality. I brought it up. I have like this kind of like mentor teacher guy that I work with for mostly for like spiritual work, and I asked him about the darkness retreats. I was like, "Oh, have you heard of these things? I think they're new." And he's like, he's in his 70s. He's like, "Oh, you young kids just rediscovering ancient knowledge." And he starts going into it. And I'm like, "Well, it's good. It's good that young people are rediscovering these things because I haven't heard of it before. So it's great to have someone that has a very large platform like Aubrey to be like bringing ancient wisdom back to like the pop culture, if you will."
Yeah, totally. And I think it's, with the exchange of information nowadays and social media, it's like making all this stuff a lot more relevant again.
Mhm.
Before it was just like ancient mystery schools and ancient mystery traditions, and that you would have to like know the right people to talk to and understand it. And now it's like we have all these people that are sharing their experiences and making it more widespread and more accepted, which is great.
Mhm. Yeah, you talked about having your psychedelic experience and then going back into the real world, and then my interpretation of that was like very disorienting, which I've kind of experienced myself too in like in a similar fashion, which is you can get like overstimulated or things don't make sense, or you might see someone who gets just so enraged at something and you're just kind of this observer and you're like, what is that about? That's not real. Is there something that you had wished was part of like an integration protocol or some way to have made that a little bit easier or less disorienting or easier to take the lessons with you and not have to try to like piece everything back together?
Yeah, I think my first experience, like I did it with a guide, and he was like, trying to help me with integration. I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even know what integration was. And I think maybe if I had a little bit more context around integration beforehand and known that it was like a thing that I needed to do,
Mhm.
would have been more helpful. I think as I've done more journeys since then, I've integration has definitely become like a big part of it, and I integrate a lot faster than I used to. Unless it's like a week of medicine. I went to this this medicine retreat back in 2021, actually with Blue. We were both on the same retreat. It was like so funny and random, synchronistic.
Oh, it
I've
wasn't
never
planned?
No, well,
Oh,
no,
wow.
like, we literally, like, I've met her once before, and we'd kind of been in each other's orbits, but didn't really never, like, spent any time together, and, like, literally just, like, bonded on that trip. But it was intense. We did Temazcal, and then we did 2 nights of peyote, and then we did bufo, and then we did 2 nights of ayahuasca, all within, like, 6 days, and it was so intense. And then I got back to New York, and I was like, "Oh my god, horns and and Puerto Rican like bass mobiles driving by my shaking my apartment." So like, yeah, integration is definitely like a thing that it can be jarring to like come back to a city and not be in nature right afterwards, but you don't always have that luxury. But
Mhm.
I think integration it is what you need to do, because so many people they go on all these like almost like medicine. They're just always doing medicine, but not integrating the learnings and not integrating what they're finding into everyday life. And so I think that's important to do when you're doing medicine journeys like that.
Yeah, it makes me think of how shavasana is, they say, like the most important pose in yoga. And from someone who doesn't practice yoga or is unfamiliar, it's the pose where you just lay there, the dead man's pose. So you're literally on your back with your palms up and just being and listening, like you're in a space of just like receiving. And I think when you're doing something like psychedelics or even like any kind of really intense personal development, that you have to have the equivalent of that shavasana. So you have to have the quiet and the space to process and integrate and not constantly be trying to do or solve or heal, because in that doing, it's almost like you're like subconsciously running away from something if that's your constant, if there's not time for a break and an integration and a processing, and then you're kind of, in my mind, like undoing the thing that you're trying to do, which is to heal or to get through trauma or to maybe use it as a creative outlet, whatever it is. But there is a beautiful necessity in stillness.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that. It's just like letting everything kind of sink in and taking the time to do that. Taking the time to like rest and absorb and receive and feel that moment.
Hmm. I guess the last bit that I want to get into with you is there's this idea of muses when it comes to creativity, and something like the muse just like shows up to you, or that, and you, that this is where the discipline kind of ties in, is that I forget which writer they used as the example, but he was like, I only write when I'm inspired, and that just happens to be every day at 9 a.m. And it is that you can't just wait for inspiration to strike you, that you do have to have a little bit of discipline for it, for the environment to be friendly for creation. So when it comes to the very first step, which is just getting inspired or just like trying to find what is the thing that I'm going to create, is there something that you've figured out for your course that you're recommending to people? Maybe someone has like a 9 to 5 job that they absolutely hate, but they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Like, what is the first step to creation?
The first step to creation. Well, I
Yeah.
think there can be different arenas of that, right? If you're creating in a space of wanting to live your dharma, I think it is like figuring out what is your dharma. Part of the course is like deconstructing, like I was talking about, your adopted identity, like the identity that your parents, your society, like that told you that you needed to be,
Hmm.
and then deconstructing your natural identity of like, okay, what do I love to do? How do I love? What gifts do I have? What is it that what message do I want to share with the world? And how do I create from that space? Right. I think that's like finding what inspires you. You know, a lot of times it's like people teach what they need to heal and or be liberated from. And so if you've overcome something in your life, or you want to overcome something that you feel like is holding you back, then maybe that's an area of space to look at, is to overcome that and learn how you did it and teach that to the world. I think that's one arena of, this is like kind of more what I'm teaching in the course, is doing that as like a living your dharma into a personal brand space and translating that into making money with that, and like standing out above, standing out in a space of a personal brand. Now I would say like in an actual space of creativity, the muse, it shows up at different times. It's like, well, I never like, it's one of the reasons like I never like working by the hour, because like, I could get a hit, and it's like when I make a hat, it's like sometimes it'll take me 10 hours to make a hat, and it'll spread out over like a span of 4 weeks, because it's like, oh, I get an idea and then I add it to the hat, and I get an idea and I add it to this. And so I think the muse does come at different times or different spaces, or you see something that inspires you. So there is no, I think also probably knowing yourself, like this guy that you were talking about, it's like 9 a.m. every day. Oh, okay, great. And for me, like, I know that my mind operates the at the most optimal state from like 8 to like noon, 8 to like 1 or 2, in terms of like work that I have to do that's like thinking and creative and things. So I plan like, you know, in my days, like I'll plan podcasts and photo editing and probably even hat making kind of towards the end of the day, when I'm not, my brain doesn't have to be so sparked for creating and writing and things like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I've heard something really similar, which is if you were to look at a Venn diagram and you had trauma and your skill, and then that overlap would be your purpose or
Mm.
like your mission. And I love that so much because it's positive psychology. So it's like taking something that has this negative charge and then turning it into something beautiful that has contribution to it, which I think a lot of people are looking for, maybe not even knowingly. Like, well, I'm not feeling fulfilled in whatever this is. So it's being able to find some kind of something like above yourself that's giving back in some form or another. And usually, if you look at it, a previous wound or a trauma, that's a beautiful way because a lot of us probably share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's like also what my girlfriend teaches. She's like, what, how to heal through things is when you heal through things is usually what you become an expert in. And
Mm-hmm.
when you become an expert in it, then you obviously can teach that, and it can be your mission and to help other people heal through the same thing, or whatever that is. I mean, it could be, anything that you learn and you become an expert at, and then you can teach other people to do it, and that can be your purpose and your life path, and give you more meaning to your life and to what you're creating in the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, this was incredible. Before we take off, do you want to tell the listeners where they can follow you, how they can support you, and any projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is probably the good hub. It's at Nick Onken, Nikonken. My website is onken.co. And yeah, I'm doing a free masterclass, and we're just doing the course and photo shoots and all that stuff. So you can find all that info on the gram. I think that's probably the easiest, most up to date way to do it.
Awesome. Well, this was great, and maybe I'll bump into you in Austin someday.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
And that's it for this week's episode of Chatting with Candice. Before you go, if you haven't left a 5-star review, please do that. It helps me a ton. It takes 1 minute. You can just click the 5 stars. You don't even have to type if you are on the go. I greatly appreciate it. And if you like this or any other episodes, if you could share it with your friends, family, and socials, all of those things help us become discovered. We are the little podcast that could. And I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.